Welcome to JTV, the Global Jewish channel. Well, today we're outside the UK Parliament and we're here talking to Tim Farron. Tim, until a couple of months ago, was the leader of the UK's second biggest progressive political party, the Liberal Democrats. Now, during the recent UK general election campaign, Tim was pressed on his own personal religious views. Watch.
Personally, though, do you think, as a Christian, that homosexual sex is a sin?
Well, I think that, first of all, I mean, somebody who is a Christian does not then go enforcing their views on other people. And it's not our issues, our views on personal morality that matter. What matters is, do we go out there and fight for the freedom of every single individual to be who they wish to be?
Okay, I take your point, but
that's what makes a liberal.
Okay, but I'm asking for your personal view. Do you personally, as a Christian, believe that homosexual sex is a sin?
To understand Christianity is to understand that we are all sinners.
Inside my terrible metropolitan bubble, I'm afraid to say that whenever your name comes up, people say, well, I might vote for Tim Farron, but I can't because he's a homophobe.
That's ludicrous. Being gay is not a sin. And as a committed Christian, I believe that you judge absolutely nobody.
So after the election, Tim resigned from being leader of the Liberal Democrats, and in his resignation speech he said that he felt it was very, very difficult, if not impossible, to be someone that holds religious, socially conservative views whilst also being leader of a political party. And he said this is a very worrying thing to have to say in modern, liberal, 21st century Britain.
From the very first day of my leadership 2 years ago, I have faced questions about my Christian faith, asked about matters to do with my faith. I felt guilty that the focus was distracting attention from our campaign, obscuring our message. To be a political leader, especially of a progressive liberal party in 2017, and to live as a committed Christian, to hold faithfully to the Bible's teaching, has felt impossible for me. There are Christians in politics who take the view that they should impose the tenets of their faith on society. But I have not taken that approach because I fundamentally disagree with it. It is not liberal, and actually it's counterproductive when it comes to advancing the gospel. Even so, I seem to have been the subject of suspicion because of what I believe and who my faith is in which case we are kidding ourselves if we think we yet live in a tolerant liberal society. And that's why I have chosen to step down as leader of the Liberal Democrats.
So I wanted to sit down with Tim to talk to him about whether it's really possible to be someone that is religious and involved in politics and legislating, especially if you consider yourself to be a progressive. Tim, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on JTV. Really, really grateful to have you here.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, I'm a religious guy. You clearly are. I want to discuss a little bit and explore how religious views and religious people are treated in British politics today. Can you start off just by telling us a bit about your own religious background and views?
Well, I was brought up in I would say a fairly sort of secular, non-believing household, if you like. That was the Anglican heritage there. My mum and dad, both wonderful, loving parents, but they were divorced. I lived with my mum. Dad Catholic, I should say, but I only went to church with him the once. And in fact, I wasn't impressed. There's nothing to do with him or that church. It was probably down to me being 12 or something. But so just to build a picture of somebody who was not brought up with a kind of religious background really at all. At the age of 18, I decided to become a Christian. I kind of, to paraphrase C.S. Lewis, I believed it to be true.
And how did that happen?
Well, I was in a situation where, physically it happened. I'm a very poorly travelled child, shall we say. We didn't have those opportunities. But my mum, who worked for Preston Poly, now the University of Central Lancashire, at the time got a job seconded to a college in Singapore. It was the summer between A-levels and university, and off I went. And we were in some rented house where there was the previous owner's stuff still around. And I just read a bunch of their books, and some of it was C.S. Lewis stuff, some of it was other stuff, and I began to realise that this Christ fella, he really existed, and on the balance of probabilities, what he says is true, in which case I must respond. So right. I'm not somebody who is culturally religious. It's not something I was brought up with. I believe it to be true, but I also, as a liberal, and I think that's something I am born with. You value everybody else's different standpoint and realise that that if you belong to a minority, which I guess I do, then
As a
Christian, I must fight for everybody else's individual liberty as well.
So can you tell us, you resigned and you made a statement saying that you felt it wasn't really possible to be religious and a leader of a political party in 21st century Britain. What did you mean by that?
So I didn't quite say that. What I said that for me personally, I think a wiser person than me could have handled all the stuff I got in the time I was leader, better. But given how I'd engaged with it all, I took the view that I had kind of two choices really, or there was two challenges. One was to either bat away the questions I would get about all sorts of stuff, biblical related stuff, things to do with personal morality and all that kind of stuff, and just compromise on it all, and so the questions would go away.
Right.
Or I could play the Jeffrey boycott straight back to it all the time. And then I'm just doing the party a massive disservice, because if I'm the main spokesperson of the party and all they're wanting to do is, talk to me about what the Bible says about various things actually, I'm kind of letting the side down, I'm letting liberalism down, letting the party down. So could I have handled it differently? Yeah, I'm sure I could. So I took that view. What I think it does do is it liberates me to be more open. I think I did a job as party leader, which was to stop us dying. That was module 1, the most important module.
Yeah.
The growth and the thriving and the returning to government are not possible if you're not alive. So I felt content I'd done that job.
But it sounds like you're saying that it was very difficult, if not impossible, for you to be leader of the Liberal Democrats, a progressive party, and hold personal, religiously conservative views.
So, in one sense, I am a liberal, but I think that the issue is you have I think the media position, which is not aggressive, it's just a little bit ill-informed, is one which is based upon the kind of root and branch secularism, and a failure to understand that people with a religious faith consider that to be not just culturally but actually important to them. And now, as a liberal, I passionately choose not to impose what my conscience tells me on anybody else. And I find, and they did not get that.
Yeah.
And so there was a kind of level of sort of intrusion that I think most people probably thought was unfair, but it was certainly damaging to our ability to get our message across.
But Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's sort of rising the ranks of the Tory party, some might say comically, he was asked and pressed on his socially conservative religious views, and yes, he was attacked a little bit by the media, but the party at least seemed to have been a lot more tolerant and forgiving towards him than perhaps you were treated. And I'm just wondering, do you think that maybe this is more an issue of tolerance and acceptance of conservative religious views among progressive people and progressive political parties?
I hate using the word conservative in any positive way whatsoever, so I kind of reject
religious
that kind of
views.
nomenclature.
Okay,
but yeah, so yes, I think the problem is, there's a great somewhat sort of frightening, but let's put it in the context of its time, Edmund Burke quote, which says, "All the laws against the godless have not saved one single soul." And that is a reminder that folks of religious persuasion who think that they can legislate to make people who aren't behave as though they are, they're acting in a completely wrong-headed way, and actually a fundamentally illiberal way.
Yeah.
Because I explained to you how to my mind, I came to become a Christian. That wasn't me. If someone had forced me to do it, do you think I'd have done it? No chance.
But what's interesting is that Jacob Rees-Mogg,
Yeah.
he said I would have a free vote on these matters, but you've actually said I have these personal views, but I'm going to vote in favour of LGBT rights and all these kind of issues. So what I'm asking is, of anyone to be able to get the kind of acceptance in politics of religious views would be someone like you, and yet you actually had more of a problem. So I'm saying,
yes,
does the progressive side of politics have an issue with people in politics who just hold personal religious views.
So somebody who genuinely, during the election, I realised it probably came across as defensive, but now I can be absolutely open with you. I am genuinely passionate about LGBT rights, and it is amongst the reasons I joined the Liberals. If you go back to the mid-late 80s, the Labour Party, with the exception of, the Ken Livingstons of this world and Peter Tatchell and so on, was immensely conservative about LGBT rights, and it was the Liberals who championed those rights. It's amongst the reasons I joined the Liberal Party. And so I don't think the progressive movement's got a problem. I think that society, and it's hard to know, there are some, and certainly some who mediate our news, who cannot grasp the notion that if you hold religious views, that you wouldn't want to impose them on other people, which is a wrong-headed. So Jacob Rees-Mogg
didn't get the same level of
abuse. Because I think there is an assumption that follows. Because people have a wrong-headed view of Christianity and of religion more generally, that A, it's all about authoritarian views on morality, and B, that if you have those views, you'd impose them on anybody else. So first of all, my advice.
Just saying, people understand it more when it comes to someone like him.
Well,
he's a conservative.
It's a simplicity, but it's also a failure to understand that. If you look at, I love the Book of Amos in the Old Testament, and I love it for many reasons. Yes, it is an immensely sort of terrifying book in many respects, but it fires judgment in a comprehensive 360 degrees way. So yes, it talks about personal morality, but it actually talks more about what we might call the public morality of our failure as a country to look after the poor, the refugees, the abuse of the exploited, and the neglect of the orphan and the widow. And my challenge to Jacob Rees-Mogg is that you have got a very partial understanding of the Bible you claim to believe in, very partial. I like to think I've got a comprehensive one, I say that humbly, and I also believe that when it comes to private morality, the only person whose private morality I have any interest in is mine, and that I am responsible for, and I will fight for everybody else's right to choose theirs.
There's clearly not going to be an issue when you have religious people who hold views about taking care of the poor and refugees when it comes to progressives. But then we're going back to this. The key issue is people who have privately held moral views. Progressives don't seem to be able to tolerate politicians who have private views. Why is that? And can it be resolved?
I think they do. I think in a world where you've got 24-hour media, it's interesting, 24-hour media and social media ought to mean, we've got more time to discuss these things, the opposite is the case.
But they didn't, because you were resigned.
Debate is... No, and the opposite is the case. The reality seems to me that the ability to have a grown-up discussion about these things, people to take the time to understand, that's no longer the case. And what you have is a society where everything is boiled down to 140 characters or less. And so Jacob Rees-Mogg, the approach to him was within the kind of orbit that he would consider important to him, was positive. I think that is in part a failure to understand that whilst I accept people's right to believe that for some you impose your faith on others, I don't think that. I really don't think that. I think it's counterproductive and illiberal. But it's also a failure to understand the comprehensive message from a Christian, comprehensive message of Christianity, which is we must not judge, but actually God will, and God will judge in the round,
so if we were
publicly and privately.
So if someone was sitting down here and talking to you, and they're a member of the Lib Dems, and they're saying, I know what your personal beliefs are, I know you don't want to impose them on anyone, but I think because of your personal views on morality, you should not be, you have no place in the Liberal Democratic Party. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, no one said that, and it's not even hypothetical. That person wouldn't be a Liberal.
I know Lib Dems who have said that.
Yeah, well, in the nicest possible way, they're not Liberals.
Right. So that's a very powerful thing to say. So where do you think you can draw the line when people have personal moral views?
Well, look, there's a difference between believing that so Christianity is about grace. It's not about earning your way into heaven. It's about accepting that Jesus has done all of the work, 100% of it. I'm not reliant upon my performance. It's on His. But what should follow is that our lifestyle should then be changed to fit His teaching. Now, and that is for me. to make those decisions. And we all have a worldview. We all make choices based on a kind of a morality that we acquire. Now, whether you can point to it, you and I can probably point to it from a book. Others may point to a variety of life experiences, and I'll fight for their rights to make their choices. So I think that if you think that the liberal movement, certainly in Western Europe and in particular this country, was directly attached to religious liberty.
That's right.
The leadership of it probably came from the non-conformist Christian denominations, but it absolutely included Jewish people, it included a relatively small number of Muslim people in this country at that time, Roman Catholic people, and atheists and secularists as well. It was about people having the right to private conscience and it not being policed by the state, an Anglican-infused state at that point.
Absolutely.
And it's no better, maybe no worse either, but no better than a secular atheist-infused state either.
Do you think society necessarily needs a religion in order to maintain its moral standards?
Well, I'm bound to think as a Christian that that society is best when lived in accordance with those values. But I can point to pretty much every example that there's ever been on the planet, starting with Constantine, that when the state appropriates Christianity, it's bad news for Christianity and it's bad news for the state.
Right. So it's one final question, which is that it might be plausible, as you said, to hold certain personal religious views, but want to have different liberal political views and legislative views. But what about in a specific case like abortion? If you really did believe it was murder, how could you then say, well, I'm going to vote differently, I'm going to allow it? That seems like it's something where you can't really it can't be coherent to have one thing and another.
I see the point on that, and I think that the issue is about where does the law step in? Do you see it as an inevitability? Do you see it from the point of view not so much as about rights, but about compassion for people in desperate circumstances, and recognise in the absence of a legislative framework on the best scientific advice, that abortion happens anyway. Only it happens in more tragic, more dangerous circumstances. So my motivation may come from a different place, but on balance, I've taken the view. I respect people who think that you can't, and there should be a brick wall there. But my view is how do you minimise harm? How do you show most compassion? And my view is that that's best done under a legal framework.
Right. I have to do one final thing just quickly before we finish.
All right.
Last one, I promise you. And this is something that a lot of people in conservative circles and Jewish circles as well find particularly interesting, which is that it seems to be that progressive people in politics in general at the moment in Britain, they're far quicker to denounce Christians who express religious views on matters that might be a bit socially conservative. I know you don't like that word, but they're far more forgiving of Muslim political leaders who have far greater political power and have far more extreme socially conservative views. How do you square that? Why do you think that is?
I mean, obviously I hear people say that. I think the important thing to remember is, for all that we've talked about, the kind of position of Christianity and religion more generally in the United Kingdom today, I'd much rather be here than being a Christian in countless other countries in the world where it would be literally illegal for me to hold a faith, certainly for me to express it. So this is a free society, and we should value it and we should be very grateful for it and treasure it. I think that the response when people say that Christians get more of a hard time than other faith groups, I think our response as Christians should be to be gracious about it.
But why do you think it is?
So, that's people. I think what we got is an attitude of condemnation from all sides, and social media feeds and encourages that. I see it from progressives, I see it from conservatives.
I think it's more of a progressive problem.
But I think shooting from the hip and judging before you know the fact is a problem right across the board. I think that I saw something this morning where the Christian Union at Oxford, I think, had been banned from Balliol College's Freshers' Week. And then there'd been a poll and the students had overturned it. I think it was a college decision and the students had overturned it, which is great. What I was most impressed by was the gracious response of the Christian Union. They didn't say this is persecution, anything like that. They just said, were grateful for the opportunity to have their stall. That's the right response. Because I would
but you
say,
don't know why it is, why it comes from.
Christianity always will be and should be countercultural. If it's not, it's not real Christianity. So, like I said, when you've
it wasn't my question. My question was why are progressives much quicker to denounce Christians with those kind of views than Muslim people who have far. Look at Jeremy Corbyn and the way he speaks about Hamas. People who throw gays off rooftops.
Yeah.
You know, why is this happening?
Well, there's
progressives?
I mean, who knows? I think what you've got is a desire to broadcast rather than to receive, to transmit and not to receive. And to my grandma used to say to me, Timothy, you've got 2 ears and 1 gob. You should use them in those proportions. And I think we have progressives and conservatives alike in this country act as though they've got 2 gobs.
Thank you very much for your time, Tim. I really, really appreciate it. And like you, I think we need more Judeo-Christian values in our country and throughout society at large.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Really appreciate that.
All the
Thank
best.
you so much.